A very straightforward question, if I may, to start with. Which way did you vote in that referendum yourself?
Remain. I'm surprised you even asked the question.
Well, I asked it because quite a lot of people around you suggested that you had never been a supporter.
Nobody ever suggested I was going to do anything other than vote Remain, and I think you're very well aware of that.
Did you do everything you possibly could have done, do you think, to win that for the Remain side?
I worked flat out. I travelled the whole country. I addressed union conferences, street meetings, public meetings, universities, colleges, lots of places, urging people to vote Remain because of the general direction this country would go if we voted to leave. I'm not uncritical of the European Union, as everybody knows, and indeed the most of the population are not uncritical of the European Union. And I've been reaching out. Yesterday, I came back from Paris, where I'd been, Friday rather, where I'd been meeting the Party of European Socialists to work together with socialist parties, in some cases governments across Europe, on how we deal with this and what access we have to the single market in the future, and protect the social conditions that we have got through the social chapter in the treaty.
Angela Eagle has now announced that she is going to stand against you. Have you any message for her this weekend?
Well, I'm disappointed, but obviously she's free to do that if she wishes to. We have worked together in the past 6 months, or 9 months actually, in the shadow cabinet, and this is an opportunity when we could be putting enormous pressure on this Tory government, on inequality and injustice, on poverty, and all the issues this Tory government is doing.
Would you like her at the 11th hour to think again in that case?
Well, she resigned from the shadow cabinet. We had a conversation after she had announced her resignation from the shadow cabinet, and I would ask her to think for a moment. This is the opportunity of the party to unite against what the Tories are doing, to put forward an agenda which is different to the austerity agenda being put forward by the Tories, and actually gain a lot of ground. We now have a very large membership. Over 500,000 people are members of our party. Yeah. They've joined for a reason, and they want to see a party that is active all the time, opposing what this government's doing.
If she does stand, however, are you confident you can get the 51 nominations you need to be on the ballot for the next leadership?
I'm expecting to be on the ballot paper because the rules of the party indicate that the existing leader, if challenged, should be on the ballot paper anyway.
But the legal advice that's been taken by the party says that you do need those nominations, as Neil Kinnock had to get them when he was challenged.
That was, Neil should remind himself, that was in 1988, when the election of leader was done by an electoral college system. That has long since been abolished. We now have a one-member, one-vote system. The rules, in my view, are absolutely clear, and indeed, I'm not sure what this legal advice is referring to. I have not been shown any legal advice to that effect.
Have you taken legal advice of your own?
I've taken much soundings from lawyers. There's a lot of lawyers about, you know.
There are a lot of lawyers. And what do the lawyers tell you? That you will stand, you'll be on the ballot,
yes,
come what may?
Yes, indeed so.
Some people say, why should you be treated differently? I mean, Neil Kinnock had to get those numbers of people. In the past, Labour leaders have had to show that they have the support of a sizable number, actually just a fifth of the MPs and the MEPs. Why should you be different?
That was in 1988. The electoral college system has since been abolished. We now have a one-member, one-vote system, and members of Parliament have a role in that, of course they do, but at the end of the day, the final say is by the members, affiliates and supporters of the party.
But if you had to, do you think you could get those 51 nominations?
You'd be surprised how much support there is out there of people that feel that I was elected a year ago with a very large majority and a very large mandate, and since then we've defeated the government on more than 20 occasions in Parliament. We've won elections. I think we're a party that's going places and doing very well, actually.
This is something that's going to end up with the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party, the NEC, this week. If the NEC decides that you should not be on the ballot paper without getting those nominations, will you take that to court?
I will challenge that if that is the view they take, but I would also
in court.
Wait a minute, can I finish? I would just ask anyone in the party to think for a moment, is it really right that the members of the party should be denied a decision, a discussion, a choice in this? 500,000 people are members of the party because they want the party to succeed. Surely they're the people that knock on doors. They're the people that deliver leaflets. They're the people that raise the money.
But as Neil Kinnock has said, in the end, the Labour Party is a parliamentary party. Its founding constitution is to create and sustain a party in Parliament. And if you have not got the support of 80% of your own MPs, it's very hard to see how you can be an effective leader in opposition or perhaps one day in government.
Well, Neil says that, and I heard him say that, and indeed I've heard him say it on a number of occasions. The reality is the party is a coalition of affiliated unions, social societies, individual members, registered supporters and members of parliament. They have to come together. I have reached out in a way that no other leader ever has in the breadth of the political views of people I brought round the shadow cabinet table. I'm not the one who's been trying to box myself into a corner. I've reached out in the broadest way I could.
Let's go back to how this all started, which was that very dramatic night when Hilary Benn was fired by you in the middle of the night. What's happened and why did you fire him?
Well, Hilary confirmed to me in a phone call that he had indeed been collecting signatures for some days of wanting to have a mass resignation from the shadow cabinet because he didn't agree with my leadership. I didn't think that was a particularly collegiate thing to do, particularly as we were actually involved in the EU referendum campaign at that time. I was the one who was travelling the country getting support for a Remain vote, and he confirmed he'd been doing that, and we then discussed it, and he generously, as I generously said to him, said, well, look, this really can't go on, and so we parted company.
Well, you're two courteous people, and you've
we're very courteous. We both come from very courteous families.
You parted company courteously, but after that, 63 members of your team resigned, leaving you with a very kind of threadbare shadow cabinet, if I may say so. There are lots of important jobs you can't even fill, and people doing more than one job. This is not really an effective opposition in the traditional way, is it?
I'm saying to Labour MPs, you have a responsibility to represent the party in Parliament. We're only any of us in Parliament because of the work of Labour Party members and supporters and, of course, Labour voters. And I urge them to recognise that. But also, I'm keen to reach out. We're going to come together discussing how we deal with the possible UK negotiations over the next few months over the European Union. There's an awful lot of policy areas where there's a great deal of agreement, but I think the crucial one is the achievement of John McDonnell in turning economic policy around so that pretty well everybody seems to be now signed up to the idea you invest rather than cut in order to grow our economy.
But you haven't got a proper shadow Europe minister at the moment. You've got one, the same person is doing the shadow Welsh job and the Northern Irish job and the Scottish job, and he's English. I mean, this is going to be very, very hard for the Labour Party to do the serious line-by-line criticism and opposition and holding the government to account that it ought to be doing.
That's why I say to Labour MPs, get round the table, get together so that we can do the line-by-line criticism of what this government is doing. And I have to say this, that there are very many talented people in the Parliamentary Labour Party, and I'm very disappointed that some of them have declined to take on positions that have been offered. I asked them to think again about this, because our duty is to stand up for the very poorest and most vulnerable people in the society and convince the majority that a better society is one that's inclusive to all.
The hard truth is that they have lost faith in you personally, and it's not just the Blairites, it's not just the right, it's people like Lisa Nandy. Ed Miliband, who was a great, great supporter all the way through, eventually said, it's not working, it's over. And well, these are people who are supposed to be on your side.
They have said that MPs control everything in the end of the day and decide what we do or not. I just asked them to think for a moment about the very large number of members of this party and people who've joined our party in order to try and create a better society in Britain. Don't they have a right to have a say in all of this? Don't they have a voice that should be heard in all of this? And I reach out, and I'm quite prepared to work with people. I was given a huge responsibility and a mandate a year ago, and I'm carrying it out.
But those MPs have the votes of 9 million British people behind them as well. I mean, here is Louise Hay, who voted for you in the leadership campaign. She said, I completely respect the mandate Jeremy has from the membership, as you've been talking about, but in order to lead Labour in Westminster, he has to have a parliamentary mandate too, and you don't. Or Lisa Nandy, the lack of confidence in the leadership goes beyond the small group of MPs who have consistently opposed Jeremy since his election. It has become clear that he is unable to form a broad, inclusive shadow cabinet that draws on the best of our movement's traditions.
Then why doesn't Lisa come back into the shadow cabinet? Why did she feel it necessary?
She doesn't have faith in you.
A week ago, she was happily in the shadow cabinet. 2 hours later, she decided she wasn't. I've noticed the enormous pressure that's been put, and MPs have told me about this, by a group saying, you've got to get out of that, you've got to leave Corbyn alone, you've got to get away from him. Sorry, we have a Labour Party. Labour MPs have, I think, a responsibility to represent our party. And I urge them to think again about what they're doing at the present time. Surely, the Tory party is in disarray. unemployment is rising, inflation is rising, the pound is falling, jobs are closing.
This is not the
Places are
time
going,
for the Labour Party to be in disarray.
Absolutely. This is the time when we should be out there doing that campaigning on an economic strategy, very ably put forward by John McDonnell, which does present a real opportunity and a real alternative for the people of this country.
But people like Lisa Nandy are grown-ups and now quite experienced politicians. They have taken their decision for their own reasons. And it remains the problem that you do not have a majority of Labour MPs, nothing like it in the Commons behind you. So one of two things can happen. Either you could decide suddenly to stand aside and end that particular problem that way, or eventually you have to get rid of those MPs who oppose you. You have to have mandatory reselections and get them all out. Get 80% of Labour MPs out.
It's a democratic party, not a dictatorship. I was elected by a very large majority of members and supporters. I did not have a majority of MPs supporting me at the very beginning. I haven't enjoyed that position during the past 9 months of leadership. I have reached out to all sections of the parliamentary party, and I would respectfully suggest that a little bit of movement to help us develop policies and campaign against this government ought to be our priority at the moment.
So what